Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking the surprising data and honestly the incredible linguistic depth behind how Jesus actually spoke about love in the gospel texts. We all know love is this massive central theme in these historical documents, but when you actually look at the hard data, the specific words, the frequencies, the exact contexts, well, a pretty fascinating picture emerges that most English readers just completely miss. So let's dive right in.
Okay, let's start with a really fundamental, yet surprisingly tricky question about the actual frequency of this famous word. Seriously, if you had to guess how many times Jesus explicitly talked about love, what would your number be? You would probably assume it's in the hundreds, right? Especially given how closely his teachings are tied to the concept today. But to really grasp the weight of what he's saying, we need to drop our assumptions and just look straight at the recorded evidence. Section 1, Counting Love, the Big Picture. Across all four Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus directly uses or speaks about the word love roughly 70 to 80 times. Now, when you think about the sheer volume of parables, the long sermons, and all the dialogues recorded in these ancient texts, that number might actually seem a little, well, concentrated, right? It tells us that when he did bring the topic up, it carried some serious, targeted weight. Now, what's really interesting here is that this represents a range, 70 to 80 mentions. For those of us who love exact data, this immediately begs the question, why on earth can't we pin down just one indisputable number? I mean, these texts have been preserved and studied for millennia. Shouldn't we have a definitive count by now?
Well, the variance exists because our modern English translations are essentially forced to use the single word love to translate a few very distinct, heavily nuanced Greek words. Think about how much heavy lifting the word love does in the English language. I mean, we use the exact same word to describe our love for a slice of pizza as we do our deepest family bonds. But the original Greek text of the New Testament, it didn't work like that at all. It had specific, highly targeted words for different types of love. So, depending on which English translation you're holding, translators have had to make judgment calls on how to capture those distinct Greek meanings using our one catch-all English word.
Section 2, the Gospel Divide, a surprising distribution. When we look at where these mentions actually land geographically within the texts, it reveals a massive clustering in the data. Look at this breakdown. The Gospel of John contains up to 65 of those mentions. Meanwhile, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which are often called the Synoptic Gospels because they share a similar perspective, well, combined, they only hold about 12 to 15 mentions. That is a staggering disparity. Jesus speaks about love far more in John's single gospel than in the other three put together, so it becomes instantly clear. If you're reading about love in the Gospels, you are almost certainly reading the Gospel of John. So the really crucial takeaway here is how the context shifts entirely depending on which text you're reading. In the Synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the relatively few mentions of love are mostly focused on outward commands. You see this in the Great Commandment, instructing people to love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, or the really radical instruction to love your enemies. But over in John, where the vast majority of the data sits, the focus shifts inward. Here, love is the central heartbeat of Jesus' final, intimate teachings to his closest disciples, especially during the upper room discourse, where he says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." It is a completely different contextual landscape. Section 3, Two Words for Love, the Underlying Greek. So when we look at the original Greek text, the primary verb used is agapao, or its noun form agape. This word denotes a deeply unconditional, self-sacrificing love. It's actually not primarily about an uncontrollable emotional feeling. Instead, it refers to an intentional, sacrificial goodwill toward God and others. It's an action. It's a conscious choice to seek the highest good of another person, no matter what it costs you. And get this. This specific type of sacrificial love accounts for an overwhelming 80 to 85% of all of Jesus' references to love. So when Jesus was speaking about love in these texts, the vast majority of the time, he absolutely was not talking about just warm affection or friendship. He was talking about agapao. He was talking about a demanding, intentional, and self-sacrificing goodwill. Seeing this data completely reframes how we should interpret the English word love every time we read it in these pages. We can anchor this concept directly in the Gospel of John, specifically chapter 13, verse 34. This is where Jesus commands his disciples to exercise this exact agapao. "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." Knowing the underlying Greek word brings a totally new gravity to this sentence, doesn't it?
he isn't just telling them to be fond of each other. He's literally commanding them to enact an intentional, self-sacrificing goodwill directly mirroring his own actions.
But there is a second word in the data. This second, much less frequently used Greek verb is phileo. Unlike the sacrificial, demanding, choice-driven nature of agapao, phileo describes deep friendship, personal affection, or really deep care. It's this beautifully warm word that perfectly captures the lightness of close relational bonds and true brotherly affection. Naturally, this word, phileo, appears in highly relational, intimate moments in the text. For instance, in John 16:27, it's used to describe the Father's personal affection for the disciples. Or think about Jesus' famous post-resurrection conversation with Peter in John 21, where he repeatedly asks him, "Do you love me?" The interplay between agapao and phileo in that specific conversation is a subject of massive study all on its own. It brilliantly highlights the deeply personal, affectionate care that Jesus is addressing, right alongside the heavy call to sacrificial action. It is just a totally fascinating exchange once you can see the Greek operating underneath. Because the English language basically flattens all these dynamic concepts into a single word, I really want to leave you with this thought to ponder. The next time you encounter the word love in these texts, ask yourself what is actually happening beneath the surface. Are you reading about the affectionate warmth of phileo or the intentional, self-sacrificing choice of agapao? Knowing the difference truly changes everything about how we read these historical words. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep asking great questions of the text.